is not working so I think it's interesting hearing you guys talk about labels and identity politics because my parents moved us out of the city when I was really young to white suburbia, New York. And so aside from my youngest sibling, my entire family, like my immediate nuclear family is white passing. And I was very anti that from the get. Like my parents were like, where did this come from? Like they never told me to be anti-white, but I was like, anytime someone was like, oh, you're Italian, I ain't fucking Italian. I ain't white, don't fucking call me white, I am Puerto Rican, I'm gonna punch you in your face. Like, it was an angry child from the get. And my parents were like, we don't understand where that came from. And it's just always been this thing inside of me. And so I ended up identifying with the black community and people would always look at me weird, like, but you're not black.
I got
just
that
like,
too.
you mean I'm not black?
I got that.
Have you seen my grandfather? He's black. He's indigenous and black. Like, you know my life. And it was always such an issue. And then I would have family members who like, you know, my dad at one point was like, you're American. I remember like looking at him like, no, I'm not. I was like, that's funny. You know, and he's just like, well, you have American citizenship and that doesn't mean shit. I live here. Thank you. You know.
And honestly, it was all forced, you know.
Exactly.
It was not like.
Exactly.
In the grand scheme of things, we didn't have a choice.
No, we did not.
No.
They came in through the Bay of Guanica and that was it. You know, we had 8 days of independence from Spain, you know, and then it was just like, oh, flap, there goes that.
I always say to America, we're a commodity. That's all we are. We're
the
just
same thing with Hawaii.
Yeah, exactly.
We're just this land that they felt they needed in the ocean to control shit, you know, because that's what white people do. They have control issues. And they just have to own and have everything their way and appropriate it and are inappropriate in every sense of the goddamn word. And so that was always a struggle for me because, you know, my family, we weren't dirt poor, but we weren't high middle class like all the white people I was raised with. And so while everyone's like, oh, we're going to the Bahamas and we're doing this, and I'm just like, we're driving to Florida? What's a plane? You know, like, what's that? You know, my first plane ride was to Puerto Rico when I was like 6, and I barely remember that. You know, everything was just like driving because that's what we could afford. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. You know, it was what it was. And identity has just always been such a issue. And then being on the island, it became even more of an issue because the land itself is home. New York is not home. The States, this is not home.
Yeah.
The land of Puerto Rico, like that is home. That's where I feel safest. That is home. But amongst the people, like there is no home. There is no community, which is the same thing that I feel here in New York and everywhere else that I've been. It's just, where do I fit in? I don't fit in. You know, spiritually within myself, like I don't feel white. I don't identify with that side of me at all. Like I don't even care about that history, to say the least, to be honest. You know, I've always, you know, told my parents I was going back to the motherland, and at that time that was Africa for me. You know, not realizing that Puerto Rico was a motherland as well, which is kind of looking at it like we all started there, and that's where our roots are, and then we became everywhere else. You know, and then always was very proud to be Puerto Rican, and you know, I still have no shame in it. You know what I mean? But I just never had any shame in it. And so, you know, being on the island, it's like, oh, you don't speak Spanish, so you're white. You look white, so you're white. No, you can't identify as black because you don't have curly hair, or you actually aren't dark skinned. You know, you can't be indigenous because, you know, yeah, it's in our bloodline, but they had to assimilate and mix in order to survive, and that's how we survive.
Or they're just extinct. That's all I remember hearing, like in
historical
context and textbooks. The people I come from are dead, and then I'm looking at me, am I a ghost? What?
I remember when I told you know, my parents were really big on like going to college, and I was young, like I was in middle school, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get scholarships for indigenous people, and they were just like, what do you mean your people are dead? And I remember just like flipping. I was like, no, they're not. I was like, they're alive. Like you just think they're dead, and I had no proof of that at the time. You know, like I guess for reference, I'm gonna be 29 in 3 weeks.
You were the proof. You were the proof.
Right, but I didn't know.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like spiritually, like I'm learning now. Like now that I'm 29, my spiritual journey started at I can honestly say like at 25. I didn't know where these messages were coming from. I didn't know I was a vessel, you know, for spirit and ancestor. Like, I didn't know none of that, you know, because my parents were raised in a conservative Catholic home. You know, they were very like, oh no, you don't talk about certain things. Ooh.
Don't ask questions.
You know, and still like that. You know, my parents see me with like my crystals and my sage, and they start bugging the fuck out. You know, they're like, oh my god. I'm just like, well, first of all, there's actually like scientific proof. This is gonna clean out the fucking house. So y'all complaining about this bad juju. Let me help you, alright? You know, and they just don't want to acknowledge it. And they feel some type of way. You know, I like came home from being in Puerto Rico for 2 months. I originally planned to never come back. I was like, this is the last and final trip. I'm not coming back to New York. But Spirit called me back for whatever reason. I'm still kind of trying to figure it out. But, you know, like my parents are like, oh, are you part of a cult now? And this and that. And it's just so crazy to like sit there and, you know, then have my mentor tell me like, oh yeah, you were poisoned with whiteness. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And panicking over it because I've just been so like, keep it away. Like I don't want anything to do with it. And just, I guess the best way, like I'm kind of like a comic book nerd, so excuse me for this reference. But like I was saying, like I'm kind of, if you know Legion, you guys have watched it like FX or another, he's a mutant that has like another mutant that's like embedded itself in his brain. And so kind of referencing like this white poison as like this thing that's floating in there. And so you know I have all this spiritual consciousness and I'm like very like aware and being vessel, that there's also part of me that's just like, well, I gotta like play into the capitalistic society, and me not realizing that, and like things come out of my mouth, and it's just kind of like that's it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh shit. You know, let me try to fix that. It's gonna take a while. Excuse me. Like trying to smudge it out, right? But identity politics, it's really colonialism has fucked us up. Like there's no way of like not being raw about it in that way.
I mean, and it's kind of funny too. Like when I think about Mexicans, they're indigenous. How are they illegal on their own land? You know, that's what colonialism has done. It's put borders, and it's shifted us
and divided people.
In every aspect of the word. You know.
You know how many brown Puerto Ricans are like, I check right.
It's like what?
And have like played into it, and I've gotten into an argument to them, and I've like come to the point where I'm just like delete and block. Like I'm so sorry I have to exclude you from this, but if you want to stay stuck into that, it's your issue. Like I'm trying to reconnect and understand what that looks like. And
like also like I understand that, you know, patience comes with this. You know, knowing our history and where our people come from, and having the patience to sit down and talk with people that are very fucking incoherent, you know, very incoherent. You'll say something and it makes sense, but to them it doesn't make sense. And again, this all comes down from colonialism and oppression and white supremacy. You know, it's not just our people that you know that think this way either. You know, it's a lot of people.
They stop listening to themselves. They stop listening to things around them. They become deaf and blind, like in the spiritual science.
Denial, complete denial.
Yeah. The denial is
all of
real.
Yeah.
So real. I'm curious what your experience of Oakland is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, even hearing about there being just hearing about there being a population of Native people is very interesting to me because I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
No idea at all whatsoever.
Like I thought that they were also like Ohlone people and stuff like that.
I think that a lot of that for me stems from being mixed race and having so many identities that I don't know where a home is for me, and I wouldn't know what that looks like even if I tried, even if I felt it maybe. I wouldn't be able to recognize that feeling.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I think that like when colonialism has put it down to that last strip of even like through the ways that my grandmother has like assimilated to this culture, that when my grandmother was on my deathbed, I asked her like, where's our family from? Because I'm Mexican and Puerto Rican, and I was like, where are our family? Where do they even come from? And she was like telling me that, well, she really couldn't speak, but her mother was telling me that her mother, so my great-great-grandmother's mother, came from England, and that her father was full Yaqui Native American, and I had never known that. Like no one had ever said any of that to me. So in order for me to even find out about my history, it was never going to be revealed to me. It was not something that they wanted to pass down. My grandmother was fluent in Spanish. She never taught any of her children it. She never spoke it in the house.